What is a ticking time bomb that people should be worried about but aren't aware of? Antibiotic resistance. People are already dying of previously treatable infections. It's only going to get worse. One large part of this is people disregarding their doctors and stopping taking their antibiotics when they feel better. The remaining bacteria can become a superbug that stronger antibiotics don't work against. If you are prescribed antibiotics, take them according to the label until there are none left. Let's just do some light Reddit scrolling before bed. Overfishing and bycatch have caused a huge loss of species and populations of fish. There are species that have been so overfished that there are not enough reproducing adults left. Young fish not at reproductive age are what's being caught. And in the next few years, we will see well-known fish species go extinct. Thousands of sharks are killed as bycatch daily, and larger species take so long to reproduce, they can't keep up either. Our oceans are about to look very different. The massive die-off of bugs. The Kessler effect. We have been putting all sorts of satellites and other space junk into low Earth orbit (LEO) for decades without much of a coherent plan for how we were going to get that stuff down or generally manage how much stuff was up there. At some point, scientists believe the density of space junk in LEO will reach a critical mass and start a cascading chain reaction known as Kessler syndrome or the Kessler effect. Under the right circumstances, two pieces of space debris like old satellites could crash into each other and explode into space debris, which crashes into other nearby space debris, breaks apart, and crashes into more nearby space debris, and so on, until there's a whole bunch of high-energy space garbage whizzing all over the low Earth atmosphere and destroying the satellites we depend on for a lot of our technology. Yes, a dramatized version of this is the plot of the movie Gravity, but it's also a very real thing that scientists have been worried about since the 70s. If the Kessler effect is bad enough, the LEO could become so dangerous that we're just functionally unable to use satellite technology or launch spacecraft for generations, or, at the very least, satellite technologies will be much more expensive and much shitter for a very long time. No one is sure exactly where the critical density lies or how bad things might realistically get, but Kessler, the NASA scientist who first recognized this problem in the 1970s, concluded that the debris field was already becoming unstable in 2009. The demand for satellite tech is only growing, so we just sort of have to hope that growth in collision avoidance technology outstrips the increase in satellite density. The erosion of education, at least in the US, is a growing concern. Without substantial fact-checking from viable sources, misinformation is spreading at an ever-increasing rate on social media. People are taking it as gospel because our education systems in the US are so focused on metrics and teaching to standardized tests. Critical thinking and problem-solving are being boiled out of the curriculum. Funding is held hostage by those who test well. Tests are being created by the highest bidder. Students aren't taught to challenge their own thinking nor the works of others, and are instead seeing a societal norm where anyone can spout anything and find puppets who will agree. To give this question a very literal answer, I think everybody should be watching what's going on in Ukraine with drones and asking what we're going to be seeing on the news in the next decade. Erosion of the best arable land due to overuse of fertilizers and deep plowing. Dust bowls in China, Ukraine, and Russia. Grain prices are going to rise and grain in most food supplies. Also locally, the SS Richard Montgomery. Sometime that ship will blow and more people in the danger zone. And Etna Campiflegre in Italy. Many people tend to overlook or pay little attention to our biodiversity in discussions. However, one day this neglect may come at a hefty cost. This content is very interesting and concerning. The mention of antibiotic resistance and overfishing are two topics that are quite alarming. Antibiotic resistance has the potential to create superbugs that cannot be treated with traditional antibiotics, putting millions of lives at risk. Additionally, the impact of overfishing on marine life and the looming extinction of fish species is deeply worrying. The fact that these issues are not receiving enough attention is even more troubling. It's crucial that people are made aware of the consequences and take action to prevent these catastrophic scenarios from unfolding. The implications of these ticking time bombs are far-reaching and could dramatically alter life as we know it. We cannot afford to ignore these threats. What are your thoughts on these issues and the lack of awareness surrounding them? Have you taken any steps in your own life to address or mitigate these concerns? Let me know in the comments down below, and let's move right into our next Reddit post. Who, in your opinion, is a prime example of you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain? It's definitely Rudy Giuliani. You have to actively be trying to mess up a legacy as a 9/11 hero. Fred Phelps of the Westboro Baptist Church spent much of the 60s and 70s as a prominent civil rights lawyer. That's not something I ever expected to read. O.J. Simpson. Had he not murdered his ex-wife and her boyfriend, he would have likely remained among football's greatest. He may have eventually bought a team and other companies, as many other football players do, and his acting career probably would have amounted to something bigger too. Well, unfortunately, he couldn't do that. Now, whenever anyone says his name, it goes straight to the murders. It doesn't matter that he was acquitted. Everyone knows he did it, and his career and glory days are forever gone. To one of France's most respected generals in WB1, to the head of the Nazi collaborating Vichy regime. Elon Musk was well liked for a while. Let's not forget that George W. Bush had a 91% approval rating after 9/11. And in the early stages, most people supported the war in Iraq. Also, Ellen was respected as an ideal feminist icon, but it turned out she was cruel and vindictive to those under her. This is definitely an interesting and thought-provoking topic. It's always fascinating to see how public figures can undergo such dramatic shifts in public opinion over time. Take Rudy Giuliani, for example. Once heralded as a hero for his leadership during 9/11, he's now facing widespread criticism and legal troubles. It's like he's become a completely different person. And then there's O.J. Simpson, who went from being a football legend to an accused murderer, forever changing the way he's remembered. It's really tragic to see how someone's legacy can be tarnished so drastically. Who do you think is the most striking example of this phenomenon? Have you ever witnessed someone's fall from grace so dramatically? Let me know in the comments down below, and let's move right into our next Reddit post. What is something people still don't believe, even though it's been proven through science? Not being held, loved, or hugged as a child can have detrimental effects on said child in their adult life. I'm a retired court reporter who covered mostly juvenile cases in the last 10 years of my career. My judge always made sure that the mother had a certain amount of supervised visitation with her baby, because those first several months are so detrimental to the well-being of the child. Surprisingly, or not, depending on how far you are in this thread, germ theory. I don't know how or why. Some people just refuse to believe what they can't see. Seatbelts and airbags save lives. I mean, if you want to get tossed through the windshield head first, be my guest, but I'm going to put on my seatbelt. Most people don't change their minds when presented with facts that contradict their beliefs. That a goldfish has a 3-second memory. It's been proved that they have a memory span of at least 3 months, or it might be longer. I always forget. Mental health is a legitimate aspect of physical health. The moon is real and the earth is not flat. Depression exists, autism exists, ADHD and OCD exist. This is really interesting and eye-opening. It's crazy to think that some people still don't believe that not being held, loved, or hugged as a child can have lasting effects on them in their adult life. I mean, it makes sense, right? But I guess some people just don't realize the importance of early childhood experiences. I also find it surprising that some people still refuse to believe in germ theory. I mean, it's been proven through science, hasn't it? But I guess some things are just hard for some people to accept. What about you? What do you think about these topics? Do you find yourself surprised by anything that has been proven through science, but people still have a hard time believing? Or maybe you have a different perspective on this. Let's discuss. Let me know in the comments down below, and let's move right into our next Reddit post. Who is the biggest attention whore of all time? Salt Bae, here's an example. That guy is proof that there are more horses' asses than horses. Pick a Kardashian, any Kardashian. My dog, Edit, but he's the best boy, so he deserves the attention. A few years ago, I would have said Donald Trump, but Elon Musk has stolen the crown. In history, how about Marcus Licinius Crassus? He became the richest guy in Rome, possibly in the world, in the late Republic, in part through an insurance blackmail scheme, organized a fire service. Only if your place was on fire, you had to sell to him before he would put out the fire. But being the richest man in the world wasn't enough for him. He also had to be the greatest general. Unfortunately, his military skills were not as great as he supposed. Despite his defeat of the slave army of Spartacus, he led a huge army against the Parthians, purely to beef up his own public prestige. Ended up with almost every man killed or captured. His head allegedly ended up as a prop in a play at a Parthian royal wedding. So, world's richest man starts a war between superpowers of the ancient world, leading to utter disaster and a very public use of his dead body for entertainment. That's gotta be an attention whore contender. Majority of Instagram influencers. One contender is Herostratus, a Greek in the 4th century BC who burned down the temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. He admitted he did it solely for the sake of having his name remembered forever. He was executed, and a law was passed forbidding any written or spoken mention of his name. But we still know about him thousands of years later, so he got the long-lasting attention he wanted. This topic is quite interesting and has sparked some lively debate. It seems like everyone has a strong opinion about who they think has been the biggest attention seeker in history. From Salt Bae to the Kardashians, Donald Trump to Instagram influencers, and even historical figures like Marcus Licinius Crassus and Herostratus, there are so many examples to consider. But let's talk about Marcus Licinius Crassus and Herostratus. Both of these historical figures went to extreme lengths to gain attention, whether it was through amassing wealth, military conquests, or committing acts of destruction. It's fascinating to think about the different ways people throughout history have sought attention and the consequences of their actions. What do you think about the idea of attention-seeking behavior throughout history? Do you believe there are modern-day figures who rival the attention-seeking antics of historical figures like Crassus and Herostratus? Let's discuss. Well, that's another episode of Ask Reddit in the books. I really appreciate all of you who made it this far into the video. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, it would really help the channel out a lot if you gave the video a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment down below. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.